Well, welcome back to All Things Aged Care. My name is Robert Cavino, and I am one of the hosts, the pioneers in aged care and all things aged care. And if you are looking for a clinical management system, the latest and greatest with data reporting, AI, or any other services that we're committed to making aged care better, please don't hesitate to reach out. But joining me, but not in presence, is our founder, Anthony Nguyen, of Aged Care Recruitment Experts. He's also the host of the Pioneers in Aged Care podcast. And if you are looking for clinical management or exec position in aged care, or just want to be on the podcast, please reach out to Anthony. And finally, rounding out our last host is Owen Matheson, a strategic connector and founder of Mission Critical Group. He works with owners, boards, and executives with a knack for connecting the right people, opportunities, and capital to unlock growth and drive innovation. And today we have three very special guests on the show. And one of them comes from the Mirus Australia team here, but our lead data scientist, Tyler Fisher. And joining Tyler and myself on the show is no stranger or guest, is Paul Sadler. And last but not least, our dearly beloved Kathy Eager. And we are going to have a special edition today, which is really focusing on this app title, Don't Fix What Isn't Broken, Defending the Front Door of Aged Care. So welcome today, guests. Lovely to see you again, and lovely to have all of you together on the studio with a lot of your amazing colleagues and friends. So what's been happening in the last couple of weeks? There's been a lot of action. Maybe we can just hear what you've been up to as we frame up the episode on what we're going to get into is more detail about CHCP program.
So why don't I often Kathy can add on. The main thing we wanted to talk with you about today is the work of the CHSP Alliance and what it's been advocating for. So we've got really two major asks. The first one is to maintain and hopefully increase funding to the Commonwealth Home Support Program, which is the entry-level program into the aged care system. The proposition from the government has been that CHSP would be folded into the Support at Home program no earlier than the middle of 2027. So we are advocating to the government and anybody who'll listen and saying, hold on a minute, CHSP is worth protecting, worth maintaining, and worth building on for the future. And then our second big ask, hopefully we're successful in the federal budget on Tuesday night next week, in getting CHSP maintained separate from Support at Home. But we then want to work with the government and the broader sector to affect change to make CHSP a proper primary aged care tier for the next 20 years. And that work can only begin once the government makes the decision to maintain CHSP as a separate program. And I might hand over to Kathy because she can tell you more about what becoming a primary aged care tier really means.
And Kathy, just before you answered Paul's question there, just for the audience, so as we expand on that, so what do you do with a program that quietly serves more than 800,000 older Australians? And that's what we're talking about today, and specifically also costs taxpayers less than a tenth of the aged care budget. And by almost every measure that matters, we really want to understand in this audience, in this discussion, is it working? because in Canberra, the answer for a long time has been folded into something else. Which, Paul, you've made that point to really challenge. Make it tidier, make it transactional, make it look like the rest of the system. So that's really what we are unpacking here today, and just want to put that context out there for some of the audience there. But Kathy, love to hear your take on that and what's and add it to what Paul's already added.
I want to just step back a little bit in history. Go back. This program, the old Home and Community Care program, was invented by the Hawke government, 50-50 cost share between the Commonwealth and the states. Way back then, 40 years ago, I was on a local regional planning committee, the HAP committee, and our job was to work out what people in our local community needed and help organise those sorts of not-for-profit services to deliver those. Fast forward 10 years ago, Commonwealth took all of aged care, including HAP, and it immediately changed the name. That was the major thing it did, and called it CHSP, and then it did nothing. And it's essentially parked CHSP and let it wither on the vine for a decade. So I think we need to be really clear. For us, success is not that we maintain the status quo. That is not an outcome we're looking for. We actually want a reinvigoration program that's fit for the next 20 years. And I think that's really important. I know there's a lot of providers who are like, as long as we just keep going, that'll be better than nothing. But that is not a good enough proposition to go forward on. So essentially, you've got these two models, and there's been a very naive view in the community going back in the aged care world for decades through the National Aged Care Alliance, that the problem in aged care could be fixed if there was one program. And that was a really naive and, in my view, incorrect view. The government's picked it up, but it didn't come out of this government. It came out of a bit of groupthink in the aged care system, which was fundamentally flawed, in my view, groupthink in a decade. And that's about how do you achieve integration. So we can come back to that issue about integration, because we won't get better integration by program amalgamation. And that's been the faulty logic in the system.
That's a very good point.
The CHSP Alliance, and now our vision is that CHSP becomes the primary aged care tier, the bottom of the triangle, and it sits with primary health care. And when you talk to an older person, they can't tell you the difference between where's their healthcare needs stop and their aged care needs start. What they know is that they're starting to develop problems living independently, and their health and their aged care needs are very intertwined, and we need to make sure service delivery looks like that. So our primary goal is, as Paul said, the maintenance and adequate funding of CHSP's primary tier, but we've got a few other goals on top of that we want to pursue, and mostly it's to actually move away from being the Commonwealth Home Support Program to being Australia's primary aged care program. I think even in terms of helping older people navigate, the idea that you say we've got a primary care provider, everybody knows their GP, and you've got a primary aged care service as well, and Meals on Wheels, community transport, social support, all those sorts of programs we run now become part of a primary aged care program.
And Kathy,
talk about there is how do you get into primary care, and it's a bit like the GP. You know, if you need a medical specialist or you need to go to hospital, you'll get triage through the system. But in primary health care, you go straight to the people you need, and we want the same thing in aged care. Primary aged care, you need a transport service, go there. You need walks into a Meals on Wheels office and says, my mum needs a meal. That's the front door, not my aged care.
Results, yes. So for listeners who don't work day to day with CHSP, when you describe what it actually does in the lives of older Australians, and what's the simplest version of the story? What does that look like, so that this audience that may not be aware of this program understands?
of Meals on Wheels Australia, and Meals on Wheels is probably the best known CHSP service in the country. So what we do is very simple. We provide a delivered nutritious meal to older people who are often isolated in their own home. They're often frail and need some assistance in order to have nutritious meals. But the way we do it is to deliver that service through human contact, importantly. So yes, you can get a meal delivered by Coles or Woolies. Yes, you can get a meal delivered by Light and Easy or SPC or some other commercial operator. But they won't talk to you when they deliver the meal. They'll often leave the meals at the front door. So, the older person has to actually pick them up and take them inside and pack them into the fridge. Our volunteers do that for the older person. And they also perform an important welfare check on how the older person is. I can't tell you the number of times that I hear stories of our volunteers discovering that an older person's had a fall at home, advising authorities, calling an ambulance, and often being the person who's provided that vital assistance at a critical time for that particular older person. So our services rely on CHSP funding. It is currently block funding, and that's, in our view, an important distinguishing feature of CHSP from the Support at Home program. The Support at Home program is designed as an individual budget holder model. We are advocating via the CHSP Alliance for maintenance of block funding, but not, as Kathy said earlier, just sitting back and saying, okay, the current system is okay for the next 20 years. We are aiming for a change to the funding model, but one that recognises there are certain fixed costs of operation, and also we are having a lot of focus on the variable costs that do emerge because of the different needs that different older people have. So we would like to see a funding model very similar to the AN-ACC in residential care, where you've got a base care tariff that keeps the doors of the residential care service open, and you've got a variable component which funds the different needs of different people.
Okay, I mean, I've got some really interesting questions that you framed up, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So when you compare ACSP service in regional town with the equivalent under, let's say, Support at Home, what changes then for the older person, and what changes for the volunteer who delivers it? I guess is what jumps to mind.
Well, the first thing is the way the funding's delivered is obviously different, because you've got Support at Home, an individual funding package. It's edged via the provider's care partner.
And that slows down a lot of those services, yes.
It adds an extra layer of complexity and cost. Now, some of that extra complexity is by design and needed, because you do need that care partner role. And at the moment, under CHSP, you can't access a care partner. So that's one of the changes which you need to potentially put in place, in our view, is that people assessed as needing a CHSP service may also need a care partner to help them coordinate their care. that is something that needs to be added back into the system. You used to be able to access care management via CHSP. Back in the days, it was the HACC program, but
Yes.
the Commonwealth stopped that a decade ago, and said it's only via home care packages or now support at home that you can access care management. And in our view, that's an artificial distinction which is not actually helping older people. So you access the funding is different between the two programs. But the other really important feature, which for us is a critical one, is that CHSP funds community infrastructure. It's not just about funding older people's needs. In Meals on Wheels, for example, I've talked about this on All Things Aged Care before. We've got 35,000 volunteers on a national level. So, that's a significant number of people who are giving their time for free and supporting, older people who need help at home. And that ability to leverage communities to support their older people is a really critical part of CHSP, which we don't want to see taken away by a marketised model of at home.
I think the other issue at a population level is to understand the scope and scale. So we've got 180,000 aged care beds in the country.
Yeah.
And with 300,000 people getting aged care packages, with about 50,000 more in the forward estimates, and that's it. And we've got, that's 350,000, and we've got 850,000 people getting the CHSP. So the idea that this program, and I think in terms of cost relativities, the average cost of CHSP per person is about $4,000, $4,500 a year. A level 1 supported home program starts at $11,000.
Yep. So good value for taxpayer money as well on that side. And
just good value. If the government was to make the two, there is no way the taxpayers of Australia can afford it.
That's right. That's right. And now you
highly inefficient program, not because providers are inefficient. The program is so badly designed. It's got so much bureaucracy, so much red tape, so much governance around it that it's 30 to 40% more expensive. And we should just keep CHSP like it is. But we need to be very clear in the advocacy we've done with government. There is no current economic climate. You can amalgamate the two. My fear is not that they'll amalgamate. I don't think that will happen. My biggest fear is that they'll just let CHSP wither on the vine for another decade because they don't know what to do.
Good point. And I think that's what I was very surprised about. And this is both to Kathy and Paul, but that the CHSP Alliance came together very quickly. I mean, it was more than 40 organizations, and there was 4 position papers in a space of a very few months. So when you, Paul and Kathy, when you started making those calls, what surprised you about the response? Because to me, just that uptake was, it spoke to me.
Look, obviously, by the fact we got 40 foundation members in about 3 months, we got some very positive feedback, both from distinguished individuals in the sector, people like Professor Susan Curl, who's extremely well known through her ABC programs. The intergenerational aged care program she did on the ABC. But Ian Yates, the former Inspector General of Aged Care and CEO of COFA, came on as a supporter. And of course, we signed up many of the leading aged care peak organisations in the sector quickly as well. We've now got over 120 members signed up. So
Right.
numbers just keep on growing, people who support the positions the Alliance is taking.
Can you also, Paul, great to see you, and Kathy, looking resplendent in your red today. I wanted to ask you, those 40 founding members, there's some great older people's advocacy networks there for Ageing Australia. Can you talk through the thinking around each of those organisations and how they collaborate to the CHSP Alliance?
So yes, we've got many of the key seniors organisations or representative groups like Carers Australia
Yes.
who are signed on. Trevor Rose, one of the people listening in from
Yes, he's here. Hi, Trevor.
Yep. We've had support from people like Aged Care Reform Now. They're one of the people who've joined since our foundation members. So they're in the group of around 80 additional organisations who've signed on.
Brilliant.
We've got Dementia Australia, National Seniors, COTA New South Wales, the independent retirees nationally. So we've got a really good representation of older people's groups who are interested in the sector. We've obviously got some of the major provider peaks, Meals on Wheels Australia, but also Home Modifications Australia, Community Transport peak bodies are involved, and Anglicare Australia, for example. So we've got a good representation of the sector supporting the positions that we've taken.
I also note that you've got some great coverage across the research and data stakeholder side of things, Kathy. If you wanted to speak to them, you've got the Australian Association of Gerontology. Can you talk through those contributors as well? I noticed Australian Nursing and Midwifery.
Yeah, so we do. It's a bit different because we're not limiting this alliance to aged care.
Yes,
We've also included healthcare. So we have the Australian New Zealand Society for Geriatric Medicine. That represents every geriatrician in Australia and New Zealand.
Brilliant.
We have the Australian Nurses and Midwives Federation, who represents nursing across the country. And that's because we think one of the problems in the aged care system is that the aged care system is a separate industry from the health system, even though older people don't feel like that, and even though we know that clinical skills, allied health, nursing, medicine is an integral part of what older people need to keep them healthy. So we do have the OTs and the dietitians and a lot of those other groups as well. Our vision for what we want is that every older person who gets assessed for care gets a choice, and that's what the Dutch do. So the Dutch says, right, you need some services. Would you like to go to essentially a voucher system, which is what we would call, how I would describe support at home, or would you like to go to a grant-funded, not-for-profit service, which is essentially CHSP, and people get given a genuine choice. And I think for some people, that choice and control that people get through support at home works well. But for
and that's the 3-tier.
Yes, the 3-tier. Yeah.
90% of Dutch people opt for the not-for-profit community organisation, and 10%, that is, they opt for CHSP, and 10% would opt for supported home. And the other group we can look at in terms of consumer experience is the NDIS. Because in the NDIS, if you look at the over 40s, you've got to take out the parents of all the kids. But if you look at the older people in the NDIS, they can self-manage, have an agency manage, be partially managing, etc., etc. Only 10% of people in the NDIS self-manage their package.
Yeah.
This is really interesting, Kathy. I've just attended, as you know, there's always a lot of events on the aged care stakeholder calendar, but I'm at the, today I've been at the regional Illawarra Aged Care Investment and Development Workshop, which was hosted really well by the Regional Development Organisation. A shout out to Selena Stevens and her team there. As you know, Nikki Sloan, very involved with Community Industry Group. Mark spoke on the actual real and raw numbers, the compelling numbers around the fact that we're underplanned and we don't have capacity. And we just had a workshop around, if you were to think boldly and innovatively, things like adopting this Dutch thinking of that there was the local health district. We had forgive me, there's so many names right now, but the lady who runs that, Margot Mains, and she has an offsider, Lou Fox, and she's an OT by background. And she was saying there needs to be a practical kind of interim flexed funding model. So you've got government and you've got CHSP and you've got approvals. And like you were saying, Kathy, there's only 47% they're getting approved for funding. Is there something in that, in the Dutch model, around an interim funding model that's needs-based that can move quicker than those two
It
interests?
doesn't need to be an interim funding model. That's the wrong thinking.
Or how do we do it?
About rapid and nimble response.
Yes,
So,
thank you. Yeah.
So
But-
what we're trying to do, you just raised two separate issues, and I'll unpack them.
Yes, thank you.
Illawarra, you've just been to an Illawarra workshop, and in the Illawarra where I live, we're trying to lead the country in this by an integrated approach, which and our task force, which the Community Industry Group, Nikki Sloan leading. We have aged care people, and we have health people, and we have local government, and all our local politicians, federal and state, turn up, and etc. etc. And we're really trying to
the broader ecosystem. Yeah.
Because we have 1,000 aged care beds short, and 20% of all our public hospital beds are now occupied by people going into residential care. And let me tell you, the other headline for my region, we are doing some, even though that's our problem, people in the Illawarra who get aged care at home stay at home longer than anywhere else in the whole country.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Country. On average, people are at home for an extra year in the Illawarra.
Wow. So you've got a community of stayers. They love their homes and they don't want to move, ideally.
47% of people in the Illawarra who get approved don't get anything. So that's that story.
Wow.
That's a separate story. Come back. We do need services that are more nimble and more flexible.
Yes.
One of the other design problems with supported home is that it was designed based on the NDIS. And people in the NDIS are largely, the adults, pretty stable. You can do somebody a service plan this year and it'll more or less work next year. But people in aged care, needs fluctuate very quite rapidly, and mostly are getting worse over time. And the whole model is so cumbersome, bureaucratically inefficient, the most over-engineered assessment system you can imagine, because every time your needs change, you have to go back and get assessed again. And that's why we want to keep CHSP and keep it away from individualised funding, because the only way you can get a rapid and nimble funding response is to give providers a bundle of money, which one way or another, allow them to flex up and down in response to needs.
It makes sense.
Flexing up and down in response to an individual budget for every single person.
Yep.
So I do absolutely we're supporting individualised funding model for those who want it. We just know that the majority of older people want relationship-based care delivered by people they know by name, rather than transaction fee for service, which is the future. That is supported home to a T, is that it's a transactional commercial model.
Yeah, and I think with that we have a lot of people backstage to weigh in on this discussion, and I think this is one of the most consequential conversations we'll have all year on this live cast. But to both Paul and Kathy, the fight you're leading is not theoretical. I mean, this is about whether 800,000 older Australians wake up in 18 months' time inside a system that still recognizes them, or one that doesn't. So please stay with us. We're going to spend the next section on hearing more from the industry. And we have Meals on Wheels. We have individuals from all around the country to weigh in on this discussion. But the question on the table is the one I would love you to bring your own answer to. If CHSP isn't broken, what would it take to make sure we don't break it? That's where we're going. So, Paul, let's see. We have Trevor Rowe from CARES Australia. Trevor, that will bring him up.
Hi, Trevor.
And just see, we got Trevor. You ready, Trevor? Welcome, Trevor. Where in the country are you at, Trevor? And you're just on mute, I think, Trevor. But there we go. Can hear you now from CARES Australia. Is that right?
That's right. So CARES Australia is a peak body that looks out or advocates on behalf of Australians, 3 million unpaid carers.
Wow.
So the aged care system, the supported home program, CHSP, they depend to a large extent on families and carers providing support.
And Trevor, with some of the, sorry, no, I cut you off.
Go on.
I was just saying, with some of the, the topics that, that Kathy and Paul have spoken to, and specifically some of the funding approaches, from your perspective, with that body of CARES you see, how are you supporting this? What do you see the impact is on that segment? And do you align, I think, with some of the statements? Like everyone is aligned with it, but is there further comments to what both Kathy and Paul have noted with the specifically the funding? Because I have seen that, I've experienced it, but from a family's perspective, not from a CARES perspective.
I think whatever system is operating, unpaid carers are always there to support people who are recipients of CHSP or the supported home program, or even people who are in residential aged care. I think there's a wrong view sometimes that when someone goes into residential aged care, they don't need carers, and in fact, they do. I know of one example where a couple retired, and then over time, one of the couple had serious health issues and moved to a different part of the aged care facility. And every day, his partner would visit to make sure he had company, to make sure he was getting the meals he was supposed to be getting. He was going to the toilet as he should. Sometimes in the aged care system, it has been the case that people are working under a lot of stress. A lot of providers find it very challenging. I think now a lot of providers are finding it hard coming to terms with the supported home program, because there's a lot of rules. The compliance aspect, while intended to do good things, creates somewhat of a burden. Yes. So just recently, in the last couple of weeks, the Minister, Mark Butler, and the Minister of Aged Care, Sam Ray, announced significant increases in expenditure, but most significantly, more than $1 billion to change things such as showering incontinence measures and
Yes, personal care. Yeah.
Personal care, that it would now be considered medical and not a lifestyle choice. And I think
Yes.
some people think, well, I think the starting point is that's great. It's really good after the Royal Commission to have a set of reforms that are trying to make things better. But we're in a time now where I think the government is looking to other people to refine these reforms. And the debate about CHSP and the ideas that have been put forward by the Alliance are very timely and I think welcomed by the government, because these are people at the coalface who can say this is how the reforms are working and this is perhaps a different way of doing things to get really good outcomes.
Well,
we should give some credit to Invox, the recent conference. Paul, if you could speak to some of the outcomes there, that was amazing. The gathering of your community, and then the alliance, obviously with CHSP and the upcoming event. Maybe just for those who would like to know more.
So I don't think it's entirely coincidental that the announcement about the recategorisation of personal care as a clinical care service happened overnight on the first day of the conference. It obviously had something to do with the timing of Mark Butler's appearance on the second day at the National Press Club. So I'm not
coincidentally again. Yes.
Any special influence, but I don't think it was entirely coincidental. But the big message from that personal care decision, which to be clear only affects support at home, it doesn't affect CHSP at this stage, but the big message from that is the government does listen to community concern, and in that instance, particularly to a media campaign being run in the Murdoch press, front page of the Daily Telegraph and the Herald Sun and Courier Mail and Adelaide Advertiser, etc., which was targeting the impacts of the poor design of the Support at Home program. So it is possible to get government to reverse course on some of these issues. And that's one of the reasons that I'm feeling quietly confident before next Tuesday night's budget about a possible decision around the future of CHSP.
And also, sorry, Kathy, I really want you to respond to that. Can you just talk briefly about the upcoming conference? You've partnered with Invox for a reason. There's a community of purpose. There were 750 people between in a room and online. And so, in part, we want to honour those people that have united around the mission and definitely,
So the CHSP Alliance has agreed to become a strategic partner of the Invox CHSP conference, which is happening at the end of August. And it will be an online and an in-person in Melbourne event, similar to the Support at Home conference a fortnight ago. And from the Alliance perspective, it's a really good opportunity to be partnering with Invox. Invox, does operate as an independent voice for the home care sector, from an Invox perspective, putting my Invox hat on, I'm really delighted that Invox has been able to partner with the CHSP Alliance.
Yes, fantastic win. Yeah, and there's some great people. Sorry, Kathy, over to you.
Yeah, one of the things I want to say is I'm really getting tired of every conversation about CHSP. Everybody ends up talking about Support at Home. Mm-hmm. That's what we've just been doing here. And that misses the point. There's 850,000 people getting CHSP, and mostly they're getting a reasonable service, just not enough because CHSP has been left to wither on the vine. And it's absolutely true that there have been massive design failings in supported home.
Yes.
But we can't always come back to talk about the problems in supported home for the 300,000 people who are getting it. One of the major ways to help supported home get better is to actually reduce demand for it. And that's what's providing a strong alternative. If I go back to Trevor's comments about carers, one of the problems with supported home is that the whole focus is so individualised. It doesn't recognise that for the majority of people at home, there's also an informal care involved somewhere, and we should be actually doing assessments of dyads of the person and their care, their informal care network, and how to keep that network together, rather than treating that. So this whole individualisation model happens at two levels. One is that not recognising carers, and the other is that it's not recognising the potential strengths in the community that people live in and mobilising community networks.
Yes, and more personalised care. Kathy, can I give a voice to someone in the room here? Erica Q. I don't know if Erica's in the backstage and she wants to join us.
She is. I was going to say, let's bring her on. And Trevor, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments.
Trevor, can we continue could we have you back to talk more about Carers Australia on another time? And we really want to give a voice to those 3 million carers. That's a big community that needs to be heard. Could you come back with a specific focus program around the carer community?
Yes, could I just pick up on something?
Yes, please.
Be happy to do that. Just one thing that Kathy said, like the 3 million carers in Australia, these are people from children, teenagers, all the way through to older people, 65 plus, or in the case of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people 50 years plus. When these people interact with, or when the person they care for goes to hospital, the system doesn't formally recognise them. And that recognition, we think, is fundamentally important to changing how the whole system works.
Yes.
Because carers, they just do the job because there's an emotional imperative. They have to do it. And a lot of people start being carers. They don't know they're carers. They just know they're doing what they need to do and it could be family, it could be a partner, or it could be a relative or friend. So that's something else to talk about another time. That in fact, if we could change the healthcare and the aged care system such that those systems were always looking out for carers. So if an elderly person went to hospital, one of the first questions that would be asked, or even at the GP, do you have a carer? Who is your carer? And then if there was a stay in hospital, say at the end, the system would be saying, we're going to go home. This is what's required at home. And to the carer, this will be your role to make this happen. It sounds really simple, and perhaps it wouldn't change much.
No.
But I tell you, if you have 3 million people who start to participate in a more coordinated way in healthcare and aged care, the change can be fantastic. Anyhow, I'll leave it there, and another time. Yep.
Thank you again, Trevor.
Let's have you back, Trevor, around why you joined the Alliance and what you're hoping to see at the upcoming conference as well with that CHSP focus. We've got Erica making a lot of comment in the background. We really want to make sure her voice feels
We've
heard.
got a number still coming on.
Community. Are you there, Erica?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hi,
Yes,
Erica.
loud and clear.
We're just reading your comments now. Tell
Hi.
us about your experience as a carer.
Thank you so much. Look, I'm sorry I took over the chat. I am very passionate about the aged care, system.
We love your
and
passion.
disabilities as well, but obviously the topic now is aged care. And I like I joined the alliance, and I am very passionate about the CHSP. Like like the new program now, at home support, and in my case with mom, residential aged care facilities. I don't want to focus about mom, even though I did want to share that, in terms of being a carer.
Yes.
Like definitely the role of a carer doesn't end when somebody goes into residential aged care. Absolutely not. I have experienced that for 5 years daily, and I have basically been working for free at this facility. So there are amazing, I do want to, because I like to be fair, there are amazing workers in the facility. However, there is a lot of lacking, and I'm not only talking about this specific facility where mom is, I'm talking about all of my people that are around my age, mid 40s. My mom is in her mid
Yes.
70s. She had to go into residential aged care because she needs 24/7 care. We try to accommodate, but obviously CHSP or back then, like the home care packages, they wouldn't be able to cover, like the needs that she had. But the whole system, and I don't like to be kind of like like a black cloud, but the whole aged care system, it is very, very unfair with older people, which is obviously the main, the main reason why we are all here, but also the carers. Like that is a big topic, and the money that carers are saving to the government, it is absolutely ridiculous. And the expectation from carers by the government, by the businesses, it is just incredible. So I really wanted to highlight that, and I really wanted to, to thank, the organizers of this, all of you, like the alliance. I joined the alliance, and I actually doubted, and I thought, maybe I'm not eligible because it's CHSP and mom is in a residential aged care facility. But I am very much, I went through the whole CHSP, and mom wasn't eligible for CHSP, and she already had wounds in her legs, for example. So she never went through CHSP. She never went through home care packages back then, because they said she's not eligible. We can provide just basically, one nurse per week to assist in terms of wound care. But as the DORA, you can actually learn from the nurse, and you can actually do the rest of the wound care yourself. I was working full-time back then. My mom had a chronic exuding ulcer for months. She almost had her leg amputated. And the aged care program, the aged care system, actually told me, you can learn how to do the wound care from this nurse that is going to go to your house, like to your mom's house, once a week, when mom actually needed 3 times minimum wound change, like bandaging changes, 3 per day. And I only got funding from the government for 1 wound care per week. And I am not a medical practitioner. I'm not a nurse. I had to do I had to learn how to do wound care in order to keep mom with her both legs, basically. So it is almost abusive from the government to expect this level of care from carers. I cannot, even now that mom is in residential aged care, I cannot afford to work. I cannot afford to study, because I am basically on call 24/7 for mom, because the facility contacts me for everything. And we are actually paying a very big monthly, bill at the same time. So we are not fully funded by my aged care, and we are not even wealthy people. So I actually don't even understand why we are paying this amount. She's not in a super luxurious, aged care facility. She's in a decent aged care facility, but she's not in a, in the top end of the aged care facility. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk, and thank you for mentioning carers.
No, thank you
just
for that
on
story.
Thank you, Erica. We're trying to catch Andrea Kelly if she's still there. I know, Andrea, you had a tight timeline, but if we could get you for 10 seconds or a brief response.
I think she's just moved, but we do have our lovely friends from Meals on Wheels in Wagga Wagga.
Yes, perfect.
The name,
Apologies,
the town's so
we would love
nice.
to, sorry, Rob, if you want to bring in our friend from Meals on Wheels, my apologies.
Yeah. Actually, we just have a disconnected. They're there, but it looks like their connection's on there. We may have just moved over to then Michael Fine. Let's bring Michael up. Michael, you there? Can you hear us? Welcome. Weigh in on the topics if you can hear. And
hi, Michael.
Just on,
you might
just
be on mute
there. But lovely to have you on this beautiful Friday. Looks like you're in a sunny part of Australia.
I've just been worried about how many people are watching this. I found it on YouTube, but can't find it on LinkedIn at all. Maybe there's somebody who knows. I did find it going on YouTube. Here I am, though. Yep.
Well, you made it, and we appreciate it. What's resonating with you, Michael?
Well, look, I'm also a founding member of CHSP Alliance, and I think the central and most basic demand we have is that we need to see the CHSP funding confirmed as soon as possible. This budget would be ideal. It's really important. And I agree that we've got to keep the focus on how we develop the CHSP in the future. But our first step is let's get the funding confirmed and move on with that. I think that's very straightforward. I just can't imagine how they could have thought it was possible to integrate this into the supported home program from it was supposed to happen several years ago. Every year it's been postponed. Over a decade ago it was actually meant to happen. 2007 or 9 years ago, and now it hasn't happened. So I'm so glad that we've managed to reach out and speak with people with the government, and the ministers, both the Minister for Health and the Minister for Ageing are supportive at the moment, but we need to see this translated into action. And I think the possibilities, Kathy's hinted at some of them by talking about what's available in Holland, but if we look around the world, the United Nations has recognised, the WHO as their mechanism in this sense. The WHO has recognised that ageing has changed. And in a sense, we've still got a very old model where we see ageing as purely about decline, and we're focusing only on the high need clients, those with residential care and those with high levels of needs are the ones getting serious funding at the moment. And we need to rebalance our system so that we do have a much more entry-level and accessible set of services, and we need to develop those services to be health-enhancing. The idea that you have a heart attack or you're admitted to hospital for something and then discharged at home and it's all downhill from there is very antiquated, and we need to look at how we can strengthen people's capacity to care for themselves, but also to link in with others, including caregivers are the most important. We need to think of this as a program that supports caregivers, but we need to think of how we build those connections that help keep people active and keep them out of residential care, and as far as possible, even out of supported home. We say that so that they can then start to put the resources into supported home and residential care and the attention that they need. This story that Erica's just been telling is horrifying, and unfortunately it's not the first time we've heard that.
Exactly right.
This is an alternative to this.
Yes, Kathy, your response?
Just to clarify for everybody, because the decision to amalgamate CHSP and supported home was made through the Expenditure Review Committee Cabinet budget process, then changing that decision by government needs to be re-engineered the same way. And that's why we're talking about the budget, because the ministers have explained to us that they actually don't have the delegation to overturn that decision. They've got to take it back through. So we're feeling quite optimistic, except of course we've had an Iran war and a fuel crisis and a few things that have probably interfered with the cabinet process.
Few little things, yeah.
If it isn't in this budget, then the next opportunity will be the mid-year economic and financial outlook, the info in December. But I think the aged care sector also has to accept responsibility for the mess we're in.
Yep.
National Aged Care Alliance for a decade has advocated this really naive view that we should integrate all the services into one program, and if we put everybody into one program, then the aged care system will be better integrated. And it became an inward-looking mantra, I think. It was never evidence-based, and as soon as you start thinking about the practicalities, as Michael's just done, you realise that it's a ridiculous idea. But the minister didn't dream it up. It was planted on them from the aged care sector. And I think the aged care sector has to become a better learning organisation, but I don't think there's enough people actually learning the lessons of history, and so we just make the same mistake over and over and over again.
Well,
It is very interesting.
And Paul, just on that, we did touch on this, the budget item that Michael raised, but you called for certainty before the budget. So where does that leave the Alliance now with the Senate inquiry reporting on the 23rd of June rather than April?
Well, first on why the Senate inquiry was pushed back to a June reporting date, our understanding from the chair of that committee, Penny Allman-Payne, is the reason was so that the review of the effectiveness of CHSP being undertaken by the Australian National Audit Office would be published first and taken into account in the Senate consideration. The ANAO report was due last month. It hasn't been released as of today. I speculate that a reason might be that it's actually now linked timing-wise with the budget. And usually the government, there's a departmental response to any ANAO report, which gets published at the same time. And if the government's taken a decision to retain CHSP, hopefully the delay in the ANAO report being published is indicative that they might be going to make that statement and release the ANAO report all at the same sort of time.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
But reading the tea leaves, it could be positive from our point of view.
Well, thank you, Michael, for those questions.
Yes,
and
thank you, Michael.
yeah, we'll bring up. Let's. We have.
Linda, who do we have there? That Paul and Kathy that we have not given an opportunity. Oh, is that Linda?
No, this is Tirenia. Is that right? Pronounce that right?
Oh my God, I'm in the.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, but I just anyway, I just joined. I thought I was joining a live stream, and then I can't. Anyway, never mind.
We'd like to keep you on the edge of your seat here.
Yeah, that's right. It's a circle of trust. It's a safe place.
Well, look, so I have been. So I'm really not sure what I'm going to say, but anyway, I have been responding to the post. I have watched, your previous show that was just with Kathy, but I have been responding to LinkedIn posts by Paul and Kathy. So, I'm somewhat across, but I'm sort of still really very much learning. But I am also a carer. I look after I visit my mum every day, who is receiving CHSP. And who is also eligible for a home care package, but we haven't instituted it because I'm doing a lot of the caring. And I did used to work in the not-for-profit sector. I currently do my own thing, but I used to work in the not-for-profit sector. I used to run a community organisation. So a lot of what Kathy and Paul talk about the importance of CHP really speaks to me as well from that perspective, because I used to run a small local organisation, and many small local organisations don't exist anymore like they used to. They've been merged into large organisations, and the whole sector, and I'm not just talking about even the aged care sector, the whole community sector has become much more transactional.
Yes.
And local services and local communities, so organisations are less responsive. So there's, my understanding, so much more standardisation. You know, the for-profit has increasingly entered the sector. I mean, I've also been looking at, I'm someone I call myself like a sense maker and a network weaver. So I'm looking at what's going on across multiple sectors and what the common patterns are. I'm also following Georgie Dent, who talks about from Parenthood, who is really emphasising how a lot of the problems that have been occurring in the childcare sector has been with the dominance. Not saying all for-profit is bad at all, and a mix is really important, but it's the increasing domination of for-profit sort of, not just organisations, but profit maximisation, really, rather than just profit for service. Profits are not being fed back into the service; they're being siphoned off
for the purpose. Yep.
Yeah, and you also talked about that last time. You talked about private equity and whatever something is going on with the data sovereignty and data systems. So, and I guess also having worked in the sector, and I still consider myself working in the sector, but not running an organisation, a not-for-profit organisation, or doing doing whatever I'm doing. I think that, as Kathy says, we need to be much more of a learning organisation and a learning society. Yes. And we need to somehow, build our wisdom and have conversations.
A lot of the staff work at 4, 5, 6 different organizations sometimes in one week. And that's also, part of a collective of that understanding. So, these are invested time that allows us to benefit from all, because that individual works at Meals on Wheels, maybe work at Bupa and other organizations and communities. And I agree with you.
I think we need to sit back and see what the Commonwealth's doing, because there's a bigger issue here, and that is the Commonwealth, in whether it's NDIS or aged care, but also the same thing about childcare, is moved away from needs assessment. How do we meet your needs? To what is your financial entitlement, whether or not that meets your needs.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
And so when you think about the whole assessment program and the algorithm, and I don't want to go back to support at home, but the algorithm applies to CHSP as well. We're back into robo-debt land, because it's designed with the same public sector service thinking that they're handing out government funding, and we want to make sure you only get the bare minimum of what you're entitled to, not what you need, and not what your carer needs, and not what it would take to keep you from accessing the next level of higher cost services. So there's no government thinking that I can see at the moment. It's quite depressing that we should invest in CHSP to save money in supported home packages, and no concept of investing in packages to save money in residential care, and no money thought about we need to invest in residential care to keep people out of $2,000 a day hospital beds. Because the whole thinking now is, what is your financial entitlement? So if you take support at home to its logical extension, the way that thinking is being done, it will end up being, a payment or benefit, just like getting the rental allowance and your pension and you're on your own. But that is actually not what's good for society. So we need to be really careful that we need to be pushing how do we meet the needs of older people and how do we enhance the role of communities in that. Also, how do we improve the allocative efficiency of the aged care system? So technical efficiency is how cheaply you can do things, and everything in supported home is about technical efficiency. But allocative efficiency is where do you spend your money to get your best return? And it makes absolutely no sense to spend $1.5 billion a year on assessments in aged care when you've got hundreds of people waiting for services if they get assessed, because the assessment system is so wildly over-engineered. And it makes no sense denying people CHSP or supported home if they then end up in an emergency department in a public hospital. But we have, and it also makes no sense to defund services that depend on volunteers and communities working together because that's what's going to happen. Supported home is about a commercial market which doesn't have a place for volunteers because it's all a financial transaction fee for service. So I think there's issues that we, let's not get bogged back in supported home, but there are these bigger issues about what is the role of government. And at the end of the day, everything they're doing is about transferring financial risk from government onto families and carers and onto consumers via providers. And if you don't get your needs met, it's because you chose the wrong thing. So we've really got to go back to that bigger conversation about why do we pay taxes and what do we expect from government.
It would be great to explore those models a bit more, Kathy, the empirical data and the frameworks that you've discovered, like this Dutch model, not just commenting on it anecdotally at a high level, but actually going into some of the detail around empowering community and moving from formal to more informal and more relationally based. It sounds like we could really learn some things there from some of those models where community with the heart, in the heart of the community with the community at heart. I just want to recognise Greg